There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Sharon and Shawn Talk Books with my repeat guest, my favorite guest of all time, the Canadian writer Sharon Butala, joining us from Saskatoon. We're not in the same room because Zoom works so much better, but I've been meeting her so much face to face that we haven't done this in a while. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Shawn. I love doing this with you. But you
That's
have to
great.
rein me in. I talk too much. Okay.
And my policy is that I would never ever dare to rein in Sharon Butala. That would be wasting a lot of valuable content.
Ah, lovely to hear.
This is an ongoing occasional series where we talk about what Sharon's been reading, and I think this chat might focus particularly on one book with a little bit of other stuff thrown in for good measure. What book are you wanting to focus on today, Sharon?
Having read it twice, I would be outraged if we didn't focus on Michael Crummey's The Adversary.
Maybe I'll say just at the outset that I started reading this book about a year ago and was really enjoying it, but was way overcommitted. I was juggling way too many books, and so I put it aside solely for that reason. But I got to page 24, which isn't very far in. And this is not only Sharon talking about her response to the book, but it's also going to end up being a pep talk for me to pull the book off the shelf and keep going. What I'd like to do is set up what is the opening premise and what is the setting. I'm not sure, when is this novel set? I know it's in, is it the 18th century, early 19th century Newfoundland?
19th. I think it's pretty much agreed that it's the 19th century.
Okay, 19th century. And it opens, I think it's right at the very beginning with a wedding from hell.
Yeah, isn't that a gripping, riveting scene, eh?
I will think about that scene anytime I ever attend a wedding again, where that moment comes where if anybody has any objections to this wedding taking place, speak now or forever hold your peace. I will remember that opening scene.
Yeah, and it does really set up the theme of the adversaries right there.
The end.
Otherwise, it's just more 19th century patriarchal BS. Just the women have no choice whatsoever about what happens in their lives. And this is a very poor fishing village. I suppose the first thing is you start wondering who the adversary is. So I'm going to quote, this quotation is in the book, and I copied it from there, unless I've lost it again, which is my favorite thing. Here we are. So it's from the book of Amos. An adversary there shall be even round about the land, and he shall bring down the strength from thee, and thy palaces shall be spoiled. Now, why Mr. Crummey decided not to quote that until the end, I don't really know. I think I would have been inclined to put it before the book starts, where you have quotations.
Or whatever,
But
yeah.
then I'm much too direct, I think. Anyway, my next question was when I was reading the book, who the heck are the adversaries? Well, I would think right away that an adversary, when it's quoted in the Bible, is usually evil or the devil, or depending on how you interpret. In this case, we have some very powerful characters who do not like each other, hate each other, and spend their whole lives competing to outdo each other. So, from the point of view of one character, it's the other character who's the adversary, and vice versa. I think for the reader, it really is evil. And so Crummey has set up two characters who are very different from each other. And it seems to me that we have to interpret this part of the book as being different ways of doing evil, different ways of being an adversary. One person is not better than the other person, I think was the point. I'm not sure I agree that's completely true, but anyway, to back up, the first thing I would have to say, it just won the big Dublin Prize, the Dublin Book Prize. And he was so happy, and I was so happy for him. He's a year younger than my son.
Yeah.
And so when he's published is it 7 books of poetry, and then how many? Do you
I'm
know?
not sure about his poetry at all, but quite a handful of novels for sure.
And like me, He's been nominated for the Governor General's Award 3 times and has never won. Same here. However, I haven't won the Dublin Prize. We were actually on the same shortlist for the Writers' Trust of Canada Fiction Prize the year that Andre Alexis won. And I
Okay.
was quite sure that it would be Michael. I knew I wasn't going to win. I was pretty sure it was going to be Michael who won. And that was for The Innocents, which I thought was a wonderful book.
I did too.
I actually think I liked it better than this one, but that's my peculiar taste and my age, I think, speaking. So, what we have here is a standard, regular novel in terms of its form and its way of approaching its subject. He doesn't do any tricks. There was another novel I was going to talk about, it's over on the table. I can't even remember the name of it, a Scottish writer going on about murders, I think, that actually happened but were never
Oh, yes.
solved
I've
in a
read that.
Scottish village. Yeah, good book, eh?
It's
And
great.
he tackles the laying out of the story very differently. There's one that's just seems to be the story of what was going on in the village at that time. And then one is like a coroner's report. And there are numerous ways of tackling the problem of who committed these murders. And in the end, someone is found guilty, but whether that person is really guilty or not, the reader has to decide. Now, it's not unheard of to tackle a novel in that way, but Crummey doesn't do anything like that. He just starts out, it's a fishing village on the coast, the northern coast of Newfoundland, and everybody's poor, and life goes on chapter by chapter. So if there's any referring to what happened in the past, in a contemporary scene, it's made clear that's what it is. Don't you remember Miles Taverner? One character says to the other, that sort of thing. So the other thing is that because Crummey is a poet and a very gifted writer, it's a beautifully written book. If you don't get pleasure out of anything else, you can get it out of the accomplished writing. And he doesn't go overboard like, say, an Anne Michaels does with lyricism and exquisite language, which drives me crazy. I keep
Me
saying there ought to
too.
be a law. Yay! Everyone else thinks I'm crazy, but I think there should be a firm law. Poets are not allowed to write novels. They drive me crazy. Can't say it about Michael Crummey, though. I haven't read his poetry, but I would be inclined to think he's a novelist first and foremost. So it's a traditional novel. I think the things that strike me most about it is how carefully, meticulously put together it is. And as a novelist myself, I wonder now, how did he do this? How many years did he work on this novel? And to bring characters through or drop them for 200 pages and suddenly they reappear and they're really important. How did he make up his mind about that? Did he have big sheets of paper all over the floor in which he wrote out what happened in each chapter? When I started writing novels, that's what I did for fear I'd forget somebody or something. Then I didn't need to do that anymore. Some novelists, usually mystery writers, used to. I don't think they do it anymore because the genre is much more accomplished now than it was 30 years ago. They would set up maybe a chalkboard and use different colored chalks for certain characters in order not to forget. So I wondered if he wrote a basic novel and then went back, which is another way that mystery writers work, and said, oh, okay, I'm going to take this guy out of scene one and I'm going to give him more importance. So he's going to appear over here and do such and such. Then I'm going to drop him, but I'm going to have to mention him here so people don't, is that how he did? He went back and fitted everything in. One of the things about the one time I listened to someone talk about writing mystery novels, one of the things that stuck with me was that he or she, whoever it was, said, you always write mysteries backwards. You may not know when you start who committed the murder. You may not even know who the victim's going to be. And then once you figure that out as you go along, you have to go back and put in the clues and the red herrings and on. Now, this is not a mystery novel. It's very clear, 300 pages plus of clarity on what's going on in the community. But it's just amazing how clever he is in keeping you interested at every moment, introducing new threads, things you weren't expecting. You can't really call them chapters, and he doesn't. They're maybe 5 pages long. The longest one runs about 30 pages. And things that don't seem important will suddenly seem very important at another point. And they're all interconnected. And it's the way that he's interconnected everything that is what makes me think it must have taken forever to write this novel, to get all this stuff right. So it's really carefully conceived, and it's very carefully plotted and planned. And the thing that so far I think most of the critics have first said about it is how incredibly vivid the characters are. And I think also the landscape, although he doesn't focus on as much, it's a fishing village. He doesn't tell us in detail what the fishing ships look like. He just says the so and so was having trouble on the rocks at such and such a corner. And then he drops it, except that it turns out that there's a character who appears out of the moment that unfamiliar ship got too close to the rocks. Character leaps off that ship. Not that anybody knows, because it's dark and foggy. And then he reappears later on, becomes quite important. So I really admire that. And the excitement, it's constantly exciting, even if it's exciting in a ghastly, horrible way, which it is more than once. And I caution readers who are sensitive to that kind of thing, don't worry. You can read through it without losing your breakfast. He's not that kind of a writer who wants to revel in ugliness and cruelty. He says what has to be said, and then he leaves it. I admire that a lot. I think of the reason why I stopped reading John Irving was because in the first novel that he wrote that made a huge hit everywhere, I said to my friends, that's the pornography of violence. And I never read him again.
Now,
And
which novel was that?
what was the first one?
Was it The World According to Garp?
Probably. Where there's a murder scene, where there's a man with the sharpest knife on the planet who kills someone, and we get the careful dissection of the organs. Ugh, come on, that's not art. That's sensationalism. That's pornography of violence, I think. Oh, I'm probably going to be sued. You think I'll be okay?
I think it'd be okay.
Okay, no loose ends in this plot. Crummey is, what would be the right word for somebody who picks up every detail?
The only word that's coming to mind is a negative one, fastidious, but that's not the right word.
I was thinking impeccable, but
Impeccable, thorough, a very thorough
yeah,
plotter.
yeah, absolutely. Some writers leave loose ends. I have a sneaking suspicion it's an accident on their part, but they say life is not like that, that everything gets neatly tied up. But in this case, it pretty much does. It's fascinating in that respect. It's so interesting how, from the beginning of the book to the end, people are always quoting the Bible to their own betterment or to chastise the person in front of them. And there's this outward show of religiosity and characters who are very much involved. And they're in this little fishing village, weirdly, there is a Quaker house, and there's a tiny handful of people who go to it. The others all go to the brothel or whatever. So I would say that what we have, I want to use the words vivid and intense in terms of the writing and the descriptive passages and so on. I would also say that when you stand back, having finished the book, and think about it for a week or so, you begin to see that it's really a myth. It is more mythical than it is just a terrific read. It is a terrific read. It's extremely enjoyable, except for the horrible parts. And I actually started to think after a while that Crummey writes with a kind of glee in creating these amazing characters and making them, if necessary, as horrible as possible. Or as when someone is good, he is good in fact, on both sides of the fence. The people are bad in a very stereotypical way. They're also good in a pretty stereotypical way, too. That's not where the originality is. It lies in the volume of this novel, this exciting novel. And the other thing that makes it different, and I think makes it so original, is that Crummey has paid intense attention to language, not in the way we would say as someone like Anne Michaels, but in the way of, in fact, in the back of the book, he lists the books that he used to get his language from. One is the Dictionary of Newfoundland Language, one is 19th century swear words, and I think something about Simonds language is another one. And he gives the reader no quarter. He uses this language through the whole book. But I never felt myself to be utterly baffled and to think, what the heck is that? It was always used in such a way, these archaic terms, that either it didn't matter if I fully understood the term or I did understand by context.
Did you get a new favorite cuss word out of the reading experience?
I think I did, and I've already forgotten it. That's what happens when you're in your 80s. Oh, it was so good, and now I don't know what the heck it was. I can't read that book again. I've already read it twice. Let's see. And it's often quite funny, and you might miss the funniness. Slow down when you read the book. That's my advice. It's so gripping that you just want to go zoom, zoom, zoom through the whole thing, and you'll miss half the plot if you do that. So go slow. And it is in its way an ancient story. It's not, it just is set in this locale that's unusual and particularly harsh, unbelievably harsh. That book I mentioned earlier, something about blood, about the murders in this poor Scottish crofters village, they live better than the Newfoundlanders in this story did.
I think that's probably true. Absolutely.
Yeah, not a whole lot better, but better. And the people weren't god awful. Okay, so I've told you what I think is great about the book without giving away too much, eh?
You didn't at all.
Okay. I noticed as I was reading it, even the first time, that you could make an argument for it being an episodic novel. And Crummey would argue back, look, I never forgot my theme about the adversaries. I never dropped those two characters. They're still there all the time. But nonetheless, what motivates them frequently and makes the plot possible is the various calamities that hit this village. And that in an interview I read or something, Crummey says, no, I didn't make that part up. You know, it really did happen in Newfoundland fishing villages in the 19th century. And this was pirates. People were saying, pirates? Who ever heard of pirates in Newfoundland? Apparently, in the 19th century, there were such crews sailing the ocean deep. And even Crummey said himself, I probably overdid it. I probably gave these people too many calamities in this short period of time. In fact, I reached a point where I said to myself, I wasn't raised in splendor. And I'm telling you, when you have one huge disaster happen in your community that affects every single person, that's it. You cannot recover from it. There are always one or two or three people who do, but most people don't. The golden age was the age before that calamity. And these people have one calamity and they're starving, and then they have another calamity on top of it. And I'm saying to myself, hey, wait a minute. No gardens, they didn't have anything to eat. The fish didn't come, the cod went someplace else. They would die. We have to think in terms of myth. It's Jobish in a way, Book of Job. The other thing about it, I would say, if I have a serious criticism about this wonderful novel, is let me start here. A number of people have declared this to be a masterpiece. I do not agree. I think that it's probably one of those novels that Crummey will not surpass, although that's who can, I have no business saying that, but that's, we look at the great novelists. Usually there's one novel that everyone knows. There might be two or three. This one is so detailed, so carefully plotted, so brilliantly written. I can't see how he could surpass it, except because the one thing I think he left out, and there may be a lot of your listeners, viewers, who will really go up one side of me and down the other. I'm starting to talk like Crummey's characters. Only I didn't use any swear words for what I'm saying. But I think in the great novels, the greatest novels, there's a great deal of rumination, and not perhaps in the minimalist novels, but the new ones, rumination in the characters, monologues, interior monologues. Because I didn't say it, but the narrative voice is omniscient in this novel, that the narrator will frequently speak for him herself, or philosophize is another word. And there's very little of that in this novel. Crummey may have done it himself, or maybe his editor said, no, we can't have that. We want this tight, rollicking tale. We don't want a lot of psychological inner turmoil and fighting interior. This is an exterior kind of battle royal. But I miss it. I miss it greatly. I enjoyed the novel very much. I read it the second time so that I could pick up on details I missed by reading too fast. And if I could see that this perception I was developing, if I was wrong about it. And I don't think that I am wrong, but it would be really interesting to hear what your viewers think about it. And the other thing, let me see. I don't really believe these two characters are balanced, like they're adversaries and they're out to do each other to the death by various means. And because they're different human beings, they have different means. I rather think one character, I had trouble understanding why people hated this character. It was easy to see why people hated the other one. He's a monster. But this one, why do people decide right from the beginning that this person is to be feared and has no soul, as it were? Couldn't see that myself. But then if you read more carefully, you see the plotting going on, how to bring the other person down. This person acts more by sitting in the study and thinking and then finding a devious means of achieving her aim without it seeming to have been that person's aim at all.
So
One of the
adversaries is a woman.
Yeah, one woman and the male.
So Abe Knapp is the guy. And who's the woman? It's not a spoiler to say who she is it?
She doesn't have a name. She's
Okay.
called the Widow Canes.
Okay.
Like the Cane Mutiny, only Canes.
All right. See, and I remember those characters' names from the first 25 pages, but the adversarial relationship hadn't quite blossomed yet. But okay. And what's the connection between them?
They are, in fact, brother and sister who
Okay.
hated each other from childhood.
Okay. Oh, so it's that kind of a adversarial relationship.
It's really interesting how Crummey at the end, and I don't want to say too much, but because they're male and female, it would not have occurred to me as a writer to introduce the sexuality as a way to bring each other down. It wouldn't have occurred to me. But then I wouldn't write a book like this anyway. That's not what I do. But I don't know. He's a Newfoundlander and I'm from Saskatchewan. We're different people.
Certainly the brother and sister, the sibling relationship in The Innocents went places that I wasn't expecting it to go. But that's not what you mean, is it?
No, not at all. No, if I say what I want to say, then I will be telling too much.
Okay, no, that's right. That's a good tantalizing. Just leave it at that, and people will be rushing out. Other than getting more details and checking out some of the conclusions that you made on the first reading and double checking that, was there anything else that you got out of a reread that you didn't get the first time?
Mostly just little details. I'm a careless reader. If a book is that gripping, I don't read as carefully as I should. And then I'm left wondering at the end about little details. For example, one detail was concerning a tooth. I won't say more than that. I was left baffled when I finished reading the book about how a tooth appeared at a certain point. And so when I went back, I read very carefully, and well, it was as plain as the nose in your face. I must have skipped that sentence. A couple of items like that. And I was constantly mixing up which ship belonged to who. And then the Hope, now I can't even remember. And the sorts of things that Crummey does that I wouldn't get away with because I'm not writing novels about big mythical tales. For instance, a couple of times he says of people who figure significantly before the first light, they're back on their ship and they're gone and are never seen again. And he gets away with that. But of course, it's 19th century. These are sailing ships in very cold and dangerous waters. So I'm sure there are plenty of people who were never seen again after the morning they got on board their ships and sailed out of the harbor in Newfoundland. It's a wonderful book. I absolutely would not want anyone to think that I'm saying, it's not that good. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just saying that I enjoyed it. I began to think of Crummey enjoying himself when he was writing it, having a terrific time. And most of the time I complain about books like that by saying they're guy books. I don't care. It's a guy book. But it wasn't this time. It was rich and intense and dense. So, yeah, read the book. You'll love it or you'll hate it. I don't know. I want to
Well,
hear.
I sure was intrigued by how it started, and I loved The Innocents, and I loved Sweetland a lot as well. That's the only other one I've read. That was maybe 3 novels ago, but it ends with the Sweetland guy, is that his name? Sweetland, alone on that island, and that was too Robinson Crusoe for me, and I kind of lost interest in the second half, but should reread it because it was a very fine novel, I thought.
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
I just read The Innocents. I knew his work. And when I was at the Saskatchewan Festival of Words in Moose Jaw, must have been 25 or more years ago, Michael was there too. And he attended my reading. I recognized him. That's the only way I knew. But when it was time for his reading, I had to be in some other place doing a panel or something. So we never met that I can remember. But because we have been shortlisted for the same prize more than once, I suspect he knows who I am. And David Adams Richards. In the days when there used to be gatekeepers and power types in the writing world, one of them said to the other in my presence, we were even thinking about getting those two, and they didn't use the word niche writer, but offbeat writers together to do a little tour. And it was me out of the prairies and David Adams Richards out of New Brunswick, who is now a senator and apparently isn't writing anymore. And I was indignant. I kept quiet, but I was personally indignant to be what's the expression for that? Unusual writers, weird
Uh,
writers, non-mainstream.
Obscure, weird, wacky. I
Yeah,
don't know.
there is a word, but I was indignant because I had a following, as did David. And I had, same as David, I had very carefully drawn out my territory, my literary territory, and it was a deliberate act. It wasn't an accident. And I imagine the same thing was true of David. And even when I was on Not Eleanor Wachtel, Sheila Rogers' show once, I think I might have been on with Jane Urquhart. I'm not sure. We were talking about where our inspiration came from. And I said I had made this deliberate choice that my subject matter would be the rural agricultural people of the prairie provinces, and in particular, the ranching community. And as I wrote more books, the women of that culture. And the other person, who I think was Jane, was saying, oh, I just see something that interests me and I write a book about it. And then I'm done with it. And then the next idea comes along and it's entirely different. And I remember saying, oh, you're so lucky because I had decided this was my territory, which is old fashioned as heck. But David seemed to have done the same thing about New Brunswick.
And would you say that Michael Crummey has done the same with Newfoundland?
Absolutely, no question, he hasn't he? I would say that David and I have really emphasized the human soul and its desire, its longings, and in my case, the women and how they deal with the fact that they never get what they want in that subculture. I don't think that's true of David. The men seem to write about powerful women often. Michael sure did, or women who are fearless, and even when the men think they've beaten them, they haven't, because you can't. They're indomitable. Although they have nothing, they are nobody, as we say.
The book that you have mentioned, we neither one of us remembered the name. I've looked it up. I believe the Scottish novel you were referring to was by Graeme Macrae Burnet,
That's the guy.
His Bloody Project.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really great novel, and it was short.
Wasn't it?
Yes, it was shortlisted for the 2016 Booker Prize. Tell us more about what you thought of it.
Oh, I didn't look over it again as I planned to do. I think it's as good in its way as Crummey's book. I
I
think
think
that there is a weight of wisdom and resonance to the Burnet book that I think is lacking in Crummey's book, which is another way of saying what I already said. And there's a somberness to his book that only appears periodically in Crummey's book. And the prose is very different.
I read it, I think, the year it wasn't nominated, so I don't remember the prose other than that it was a really positive experience for me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good book.
And what made you read it now, or have you read it recently? Is it
No, I didn't know anything about it, but I was in Saskatoon's McNally Robinson, and I always go to the bargain bin.
you and me both?
And I found it there, and I bought it for $8 or $9, and wasn't at all sure that I had anything more than your regular murder mystery that I would read through to the end, but be frequently pretty bored and not be very admiring of. And instead, it was this really good book. And I flipped it over and started reading the back pages and then Googling, and discovered that it had been on the Booker shortlist. And it won some big stuff too, I think. It was.
Let's see. It was the best-selling book on the Booker shortlist. I see that on its Wikipedia page, but doesn't say here that it won any prizes, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Yeah, that was one good, profitable trip to the bookstore for me.
I see he has a subsequent novel. Here, Burnet won the Author of the Year in the Sunday Herald Cultural Awards, whatever that is. And his novels have been described as an experiment with a genre that might be called false true crime. If you can get
True.
interesting. Have you read much else from Newfoundland?
Not enough. I keep thinking, oh, they win everything. I'm not going and I don't. I did actually spend a little bit of time thinking about Wayne Johnston and Lisa Moore, who are
Yeah. I read
two
one
of
of her
the
past year.
two contemporary novels. I would think that probably Wayne Johnston's the oldest, and Lisa Moore is probably the youngest of the three, but she's not a 20-year-old. She's published a lot of books, is thought very highly of. And the differences among these three, they're all born and bred Newfoundlanders. Wayne Johnston is a more scholarly, well, you can't really say that.
He certainly writes a lot about the history of Newfoundland. One of his novels isn't Joey Smallwood, the main character.
Yeah.
I have a social media friend. We've never met face to face, but she's been on my channel. Not as much as you, but she has been on my channel more than a half dozen times. She's from Newfoundland and an avid reader and connected with she's not a writer as far as I know, but she's very connected with what's going on literarily in Newfoundland. And so she was my guest, and we did a full hour video where she talked about her favorite Newfoundland literature. And so I'll put a link to that in the show notes because it was a fabulous chat with a great reading list for anybody interested in Newfoundland literature.
Oh, terrific. Yeah. Well, Lisa Moore, being younger and a woman, is much more, I don't know if this is the reason, but you need to know that. But the work of hers that I've read, she was particularly well thought of for short stories in the beginning. It tends to be more the kind of thing that I write, or I think I write, who knows, in that it is very much concerned with women and women's interior lives, their desires and their ways of approaching the world that differ from the ways the men in their lives do, which is an Ann Tyler kind of thing, except she's not sentimental.
And is Ann Tyler?
I just finished reading one of her novels. It's been about a year ago now. It was a new book at the time, and I was just, give me a break. And I was shocked because when she started writing, I don't think she was like that.
The one of Lisa Moore's that I have read is This Is How We Love, which sounds like a very sentimental title, but it's not a sentimental book, and I really enjoyed it. So that's all I've read by her.
Good title for me to order from the library.
You can borrow my copy anytime, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm going to be at WordFest in Calgary this October, just the opening panel on the 17th, I believe, with Rosemary Griebel and Merilyn Simonds from Ontario. Lovely person, lovely writer. As Rosemary is a poet, and she's a terrific person. Anyway, I was trying to track down Merilyn Simonds' books so that I could. It's been ages since I read one of her books, and it's about time that I.
Yeah, you told me that, and I looked up her most recent book. It's from a few years ago, but isn't it nonfiction, something about gardening? Have I got that?
Well, there was one by gardening, but the most recent one is about a famous birdwatcher, a woman birdwatcher,
That's what
apparently.
it. That's what it.
The library only has it as electronic an ebook or an audiobook. Oh, I hate that. I want paper in my hands.
That's a good maybe segue to move into Sharon Butala's reading preferences and reading habits. But just before that, yeah, it's called Woman, Watching, Louise de Kiriline Lawrence and the Songbirds of Pimisi Bay. 400 pages.
I suppose I could do like people when I go for my walk. I could take my iPhone and plug it in. I think what's the point of being outside if you're not going to pay attention to being outside? So,
As only Sharon Butala could say. Having read your memoirs, oh my God, you make the outside come alive. Even to the point where I want to take out my headphones when I'm outside because of you.
and if I order an ebook, will it just, the whole book will show up on my laptop? Is that how it works?
On whatever device, yeah. Like through
Yeah.
Libby, you can put it on your iPhone, you can put it on your laptop, your iPad, whatever you've got. Yeah.
Okay. And the audio one, how does the audio one come to me?
It would be the same. If it's
Oh,
through, then you just listen through Libby and you put your headphones on whatever device. I have Libby on my iPhone, my iPad, and I can also use it just on your web browser.
oh, this sounds so complicated.
So tell me about you and audiobooks. I gather you're not a fan
I did do one for Audible Books. My
of one
second
of your books.
memoir, Where I Live Now, is an Audible book. I don't know that anybody has ever actually listened to it, but
You narrated it.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I got hired. My agent told me to put my name in. You get paid, she said. What writer gets paid? Oh, okay, I'll do it.
And apparently you have to audition. Like they might not pick you, they might pick another audio narrator. But so I didn't realize you read it or I would have listened to it. I thought, I don't want
Ah,
to, I have Sharon Batala's voice in my head. I don't want to listen to somebody else reading her words, but I didn't
oh,
know.
yeah, yeah. I only did it because my agent told me to. I only taped myself on my phone. Yeah, I had to get my grandson to come over and show me how to do it and then how to send it. And then I promptly forgot.
But as a reader, as a consumer, you're not much into audiobooks, I'm guessing.
No, not. And if I were to take a long driving trip by myself, I might be interested in doing that. But my feeling has always been about that sort of thing that I can read a lot faster than I can listen. And I can get through a book with reasonable attention a lot faster than listening to one. And so often, I don't know if this is still true, but it would usually be an abridged version.
Yeah, I think the abridged versions are almost gone by the wayside. So
Oh,
almost all the audiobooks, if they are abridged, it'll say that in the description. I don't see very
mm.
many of them, and I would never ever do an abridged version.
I did one. It was a Reader's Digest anthology of abridged memoirs. And that was the perfection of the morning. I was in there, and guess who was also in there? Christopher Plummer.
Christopher Plummer.
Yeah. So were two or three other writers, but I was only interested in Christopher Plummer's.
Ah, how fascinating. I grew up in a house full of Reader's Digest condensed books. My
Oh,
grandma had a subscription and the house was just overflowing with them. And then you don't really you want to have the paper book in your hand, right? So
yeah, that's what I prefer.
do you never read ebooks or you just prefer not to if you have a choice?
I'm an old person. It's hard on the eyes reading on screen,
Oh,
I
interesting.
find.
Okay.
I get tired of holding the darn piece of equipment and tap tap to move it. And come on. Did you know that the first Gutenberg Bible came out on my birthday in, I think, 1429?
And how old were you when it came out? Sorry, that's a bad
Good
joke.
question. I knew that was coming.
So I know because I think you explicitly mentioned it in Where I Live Now that you, at least for periods of your life, read a whole bunch of books at one time. Is that still the case?
Not so much now because I'm busy with, for example, getting prepared for YouTube. I'm judging a writing competition pretty soon. People are always asking me for cover blurbs, which means I have to read their material. And at the moment, I'm not reading as seriously as I should be. There was a certain book that I was very keen to get hold of. I tried the public library, it's not in their holdings. Then I thought, the university will have it. I have a library card for the university as an alumna. I looked it up. Yes, they had a copy, but it was only online, and
Don't.
alumni are not allowed to, you can't. that's for the students. So then I asked some librarian friends, or I called the library, and they told me, fill out this form and we'll get it through interlibrary loan if somebody else in the province has it. But I said, nobody's going to have it if Saskatoon doesn't. It's really a scholarly book. It's an anthology of essays on Casanova in the Enlightenment. But I did it anyway. And they said, what will happen is we will submit this. And if nobody in the province has the book, then the decision will be made as to whether to buy the book or not. And I thought, why would a public library buy this book? It's not public library material. So I went down to my bookstore and ordered it. I paid $66 and all the other things to go with it. The last time I did that was because I heard that John McGahern, is that right? John McGahern?
The Irish writer?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
wonderful Irish writer. He had a new book out called That They Shall See the Rising Sun. And I could not wait until it finally hit North America. So I ordered it from his publisher in the UK for $75. And this was like a long time ago. And I got it in pretty good time and read it. And one day I was riding an airplane in the West, maybe from Calgary to Vancouver or something. And I realized this handsome young guy sitting beside me was reading That They Shall See the Rising Sun. I never talked to the person sitting next to me except politely. I just, what, are you reading that book? He didn't want to talk to me very badly. And so that was that. But it was one of those, it was a quantum universe moment.
Absolutely. I have read McGahern's memoir, All Will Be Well, which I loved,
Oh,
about his
indeed. What a beautiful
father,
book.
his
Yeah.
father. And then just this year, I read The Pornographer.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Do
Oh, I
you
should read.
borrow my
How can I?
copy? It's a fascinating book. I thought it was stunning.
It's a novel.
It's a novel, and it's
Hey, just a
about
minute. Hey, he's dead.
he is dead. He died, I don't know how many years ago. Within the last decade, I would say.
No,
He was born in 1934, died in 2006.
same
So,
year my husband.
yeah. The Pornographer came out in 1979. The opening premise is this guy, he grew up in rural Ireland outside Dublin, but he lives in Dublin and he doesn't have much of a job. He writes erotica for a magazine. And he's a young single guy and he has a fair. In terms of your whole thing about Casanova and all of the things that you've talked about in recent discussions about Don Juan, more than probably Casanova, but I think that it would be interesting for you because he's a sexually active single guy and he gets entangled with an older woman who falls in love with him and he's very honest with her and then plot ensues and I think there's a lot there maybe for you when the time is right. The Pornographer by John
Oh,
McGahern.
oh, I will do my best. Public libraries have been cleaned out of those old books, so it might be a bit tough to
John's
find it.
library has it in stock.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's 3 books or just 2?
I'm not sure that I'm loaning you.
Yes, Lisa Moore
The
and
other book.
then John McGahern.
John McGahern. Yes. Next question about your reading habits. Are you a bailer? If you're not enjoying a book, do you just stop reading or do you persist to the end?
I used to think that it was a God-given demand. It came down with Moses from the mountain that you couldn't stop reading a book till you got to the end, no matter what. And it was about 15 years ago, or maybe 20, that I finally said, I have no more patience for people's first novels, except for the rare exceptional one. What I said was, I don't want to spend my time reading books that have nothing to tell me that I don't already know. And that was usually first novels, which is not kind, but I was once a first novelist. And that meant that if I read a book and I thought I had made a mistake in picking it, I would stop reading it. But that hardly ever happens. Nowadays, with the library, like I was out on the ranch and getting books there was a library in town, but mostly everything I read, I ordered. So now I'm pretty close to a branch library. And the choice there for somebody like me, I don't want to diss the library by any means. It's wonderful to have it there. And it's always very busy. But for the kind of reader that I am, it's hard to find books on the shelf that are what they claim to be, which is another thing I have to complain about publishers nowadays. It never used to be the kinds of blurbs that you read on the covers from mostly people I never heard of say, this is the most wonderful book since the Bible and blah, blah, blah. And, oh, yeah, just nonsense. Or that the big publishers are shameless in publicizing and selling their books. Absolutely shameless. So you have to make your choices based on other ways of whether this is a book I'm going to read or not. But with this small branch library, I don't have much choice. So I will bring home 3 or 4 books that I think look like they're all up my alley. And if they aren't, I take them back. But I do go through periods when I'm depressed and not writing, when I will read like 10 murder mysteries in a row and every one of them is boring and dull, or they focus on something that has got anything to do with literature, like autopsies or that sort of thing. And yeah, I'm picky and I'm not very nice. I know it.
You're the nicest, not very nice person I know. How about that?
Don't write a book and you'll find out how nice I am.
So let's close with the next time you're on my channel. I'm very lucky that I will get to do a full interview with you about your forthcoming memoir. So let's close with a little teaser for that. Tell us about How to Breathe Water. Have I got the title right? How to Breathe Water.
Yep.
Tell us
And
about How to
everyone
Breathe
says,
Water.
what? But that's what titles are supposed to do. They
Right.
should catch your attention. And it's not an inappropriate title, as serious readers will find out. It's a memoir that in July 10th to 16th, 2021, a friend 18 years younger than I am, a librarian and a poet, said she wanted to drive to Winnipeg before she left Calgary forever when she retired, and did I want to go with her? And I said, sure. I didn't have anything else to do, and she was intrepid, utterly intrepid. And I knew this was going to be one time I'd get to loaf. I said, sure. And off we went. And somewhere along the journey, I realized that we were making a circle like that with one little trajectory straight south to where I'd come from, the ranch I come to Calgary from. And I realized that the circumference of that circle actually enclosed my life from the time I was 13 years old up to the present day. But I really was not worried about the present day. And I said at that time, that'd make a great memoir, but I had no intention of writing it, didn't think I would. And then it just grew on me. And I think more than a year later, I started to map it out and to write it. And so it encompasses bits of my first marriage, bits of my second marriage, some high school stuff, not much about university, but then about jobs I had in living in Regina. And because we were traveling every day, it was the summer that the First Nations people were beginning to search for the graves of children they believed had died, and they were unmarked graves of the residential schools. Since this was brand new, every place we went, we were faced with what was going on in that town or that city. And so that meant we went between Regina to the Manitoba border on the Trans-Canada, but 15 miles south of Cowessess Reserve, which was one of the first ones to lay claim and to begin to, through this mechanical means, or maybe it's electronic, to find the shadows of what they think are graves. And born and raised in Saskatchewan, my companion is a BC person, so it was different for her. And having been old enough to be up in the bush when First Nations people were, it wasn't pre-contact by a long shot, but they were still speaking their own languages. The men spoke English, often the women didn't at that time. You know, it was land that had been First Nations land for as far back as anyone knows, and it was being opened up by the government for farming. And we were up there, my dad had a sawmill, and these First Nations people were on reserves, didn't have jobs. So they worked for my dad. At least one summer I was old enough to remember. And the families, they lived in tents in a field just behind where we lived. You know, I was born in 1940. So that meant that my memory of who First Nations people are is very different than my grandchildren's, who were born in the 80s and 90s. So that's a part of the book is inadvertently I talked about, a book that Mark Abley wrote 30 years ago that I beat him up a little bit for. He really took a shellacking over it when it was published, but he grew into this wonderful man and brilliant writer.
And who is that? Mark?
Abley,
I don't know
who
that.
he's a poet
Okay.
and a writer of nonfiction mostly, and he worked for the English language newspaper in Montreal for many years. He retired not long ago. Wonderful guy with a wonderful wife.
Huh. And How to Breathe Water comes out in September, is that right?
Yes, and can I give you a couple of minutes on the title? Just before I was,
Yes,
yeah,
please.
try and stop me.
I would
Just
never.
just before we were to leave on the trip, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was standing in a kitchen I didn't recognize, but it was an old 1940s style kitchen. I was standing in a corner like that where the walls met and there were cupboards on both sides. And all of a sudden, I felt a drop of water in the dead center of the top of my head. And then the water began to come down faster, the drops faster and faster. And I realized if I didn't do something, there was going to be a flood, I was going to drown. If you interpret the dream, what's up there in the attic is where our memories are, where we store our memories. And what the dream was saying in my own interpretation, and there's much more to it, would be simply you're going on a journey that's going to take you through your youth, your childhood, through the bad times, things that happen to everyone when they're becoming people. And can you take it? Can you stop that? Can you handle it? And I began to be a bit afraid all along. And the dream recurs. I don't write pages and pages about it, but little bits. And the story of most of my grown up life that I haven't written about becomes deeper and more serious. And then I'm not telling you any more, but the dream reappears in a different form at the end.
That's a great tease, and I believe there's some stuff that you've never really talked about before, and there's a new level of candor in
Oh,
this
yeah. I
memoir.
actually say in one place, I say, I beg the privilege of age. My life is almost over. This is when you get to say the important stuff. And if people don't like it, tough.
Absolutely. I can't wait to read it, and you have graciously consented to letting me interview you, so that interview will go live on your pub date in September, and that's going to be great. So that'll be the next time my viewers get to see you, and that'll be a very auspicious occasion indeed. Sharon, thank you so much for coming back.
Well, it's been fun.
Uh,
Thank you for inviting me.